And members, I appear this morning to lay out Senate Bill 1596, which will repeal the prohibition regarding short barrel rifles in the Texas Code, Penal Code specifically. The simple truth is short rifles are never a problem and continue not to be a problem. In 1934, the National Firearms Act originally wanted to restrict handgun ownership, and the clause relating to short barrel rifles were simply to close the loopholes of persons cutting down a rifle or a shotgun to get around the handgun prohibition. That handgun prohibition was removed from the legislation when it was passed. However, the short barrel parts of it were left in, and thus for 89 years, we've had this ridiculous legal situation in which a handgun is fine, a long gun is fine, but something in between is prohibited by regulation. Short barrel firearms, as I mentioned, are regulated under the Penal Code. There is an exception, though, that allows citizens to own one if the firearm is owned in compliance with the federal law under the National Firearms Act. Compliance with the National Firearms Act requires registration with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives and the payment of a $200 tax stamp. After decades, the federal government reclassified a pistol equipped with a stabilizing brace as a short barrel rifle. This act by the ATF criminalizes approximately 360,000 firearms under Texas law. You can own a short barrel rifle if you pay the federal government $200. You just can't own a rifle with a barrel 16 inches or less if you don't pay the fee to the federal government. 16 inches is an arbitrary number and serves no legitimate public purpose. There's no evidence that short barrel rifles are the cause of a rising crime wave. Texas law needs to be amended to clarify that short barrel firearms are not prohibited. Senate Bill 1596 addresses this by removing a short barrel firearm from the list of prohibited weapons in the Texas Penal Code. So just briefly today, right now, a rifle like this is legal. A pistol is legal, something in between is illegal. And here's the thing is when they just changed it recently, if you have a pistol and you put a brace on it, then it's illegal. So you could go to a shooting range, take your pistol, you could put a scope on it, it's legal, whatever else. But if you put a brace on it, it suddenly turns illegal, which doesn't seem to make sense. So that's really my testimony, Mr. Chairman. Now we have a couple of expert witnesses here. If we'd like to have them come up and I can introduce them.
Thank you, Senator. Members, any questions for the author? Senator Birdwell, are you familiar with these terms, these about guns and stuff? Senator?
I am. I did want to check, though, Mr. Chairman, with you if this is the first bill that the senator has laid out in committee before I determine whether or not I ask questions.
Well, Senator, I'm not sure, but it may be not only the first bill in this committee, but the first bill in committee. I've heard that may be the case.
I think I'll keep my powder dry, but I guess my key question, my question to you would be then is this the bill that the senator expects to go to the floor to be his first bill?
I can't say. I really would rather not confirm or deny whether this is my first bill, and I take the fifth on the whole thing. So
probably be a good one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dean Saffarini.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to remind my friends on the committee that the Senate passed an anti-hazing bill.
Thank you, Dean. Senator Perry.
And so to be clear, they would still be paying the $200 federal stamp for those links?
to be legal under the federal law, you would need to do that. But under state law, whether you paid it or not, it would not be illegal.
Okay.
Thanks. Members, any other questions for Senator Hagenbu before we hear from the witnesses? Very well. We'll call your invited testimony, and we'll take testimony. We'll call your invited witnesses now. So thank you very much.
You want me to introduce them? Should I introduce them? Or
hold on. I think Senator Hall has questions for you. Senator Hall?
Actually, I do. I want to thank him for bringing this bill, because based on last Friday night at an auction where my wife bid on and won a short barrel shotgun with a pistol grip, 12 gauge pump, would now be for sure legal. Okay. She thanks you too.
All right. Tell her, assuming this committee passes along, we get it done, we'll say you're welcome.
Sounds like we better hurry and pass it, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Senator, yes, tell us who your witnesses are, and then we'll call them.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have expert witnesses Kyle Carruth, Legislative Director for Gun Owners of America, and Attorney C.J. Grissom, who's the counsel for the Texas Gun Rights. We have Kyle first, and then C.J.
Very good, thank you. We'll open testimony, and the chair calls Kyle Carruth and C.J. Grisham. And while they're coming up, I'll say by way of introduction for Mr. Grisham's testimony, of course, they both, I think they have some handouts for us. Mr. Grisham also has with him some examples, only the stocks. Of course, most people around here are carrying guns. He's brought with him just the examples of the stocks of these different weapons if someone wants to look at them. And he's going to have some visual aids as well. I didn't want you to have to use your time talking about that, but you're welcome. And Mr. Kruth, I hear you're first. Introduce yourself and give us your testimony.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, for having me today. My name is Kyle Carruth.
Get a little closer to the microphone.
Excuse me. My name is Kyle Carruth. I am here to testify for this bill on behalf of myself and of our over 2 million members of the Gun Owners of America today. I appreciate this time that we have today. I do believe that this is a very needed bill. As we are aware, the stabilizing brace issue has been kicked back and forth in the ATF and with the presidential section as well. So at current, we are allowed to have those pistols again. And I firmly believe soon the ATF will actually allow short barrel rifles to come off of the NFA. And I can provide some historical context on that as well. If we do pass this bill and within the next 2 years, the ATF does remove those short barrel rifles from the NFA, then Texas law would be more restrictive than even federal law. And so this is in preparation of what might occur. As the senator stated, you still would be, on an SBR in particular, you still would be required to pay the $200 federal stamp. But here in Texas in particular, it would only be the federal agents that would be there to enforce something along those lines. So again, it's in preparation of what we anticipate coming down the line from the federal government, and puts us in line instead of being more restrictive than what the federal government would be. I'd also like to speak to the benefits of a short-barreled rifle as well. Again, I can give you historical context if you'd like me to at some point, but as I'm sure y'all are aware, with a typical isosceles stance with a pistol, your arms are mostly elongated out in front of you, whereas with a short-barreled rifle, you're tucked in closer to yourself, where, again, with that pistol, the end of the barrel is actually extending well beyond what a short-barreled rifle would be. And as such, if you're in a self-defense situation, you're more apt to have that pistol taken from you than you are the short-barreled rifle. In addition to that, a short-barreled rifle provides 3 points of contact, that with, of course, the forend, your hand on the handguard, and then, of course, the portion that is on your shoulder as well, making it more manageable, making it more accurate in your firing, making it more safe as well. In addition to that, it also makes it more viable, especially for self-defense of individuals of smaller stature, whether it be someone like myself or a female or a child as well. I do have 2 young boys. I take them hunting a lot. And this is an issue that we encounter quite frequently with shotguns and with rifles. It's tough to find a shotgun or a rifle that will fit them. It's light enough for them to actually handle, to carry, to utilize. A short-barreled rifle is something that they can use. And so at one point, I did have some pistols that with a stabilizing brace, my children could use those. Same thing with a shotgun. The Mossberg Bantam, as an example, wonderful firearm, but it's still quite heavy, quite cumbersome for my children to handle. And so this bill would actually allow my children to be involved in shooting sports and in hunting at an earlier age as well, and at a time that I believe we need to be instilling these values in our children also. In addition to that, again, the self-defense aspect of it, not only does this, again, and I don't mean to demonstrate, but if you have your pistol extending beyond your hands versus a short-barreled rifle with the barrel here, you have it much more compact. Again, it's much lighter, it's much easier to handle, it's much easier to maneuver, and much easier to utilize, whether it is hunting or self-defense in either case. Thank you, and I'd be glad to answer any questions about the history of how this came about or whatever you might like to hear.
Thank you for your testimony, and we'll probably have questions for both of you. We'll hear from Mr. Grisham, and then we'll open for questions. Welcome back. Introduce yourself. Give us your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is CJ Grisham. I am the lead counsel for Texas Gun Rights. I'm also a Second Amendment attorney here in Texas. Some of y'all that have been around a while probably remember I used to run Open Carry Texas. We've accomplished that mission. Now I work with Texas Gun Rights to try and sort of fix a lot of these small issues. I'm not going to go over again what Kyle went over. I'll just reiterate by reference what he just said. And I'll go into some of the more nerdy legal aspects. I've given you a handout to kind of explain what the difference is between, and I'm sorry, we are in favor of SB 1596. So I'm speaking on behalf of Texas Gun Rights and myself. Really what the SBR law does, and this is different than the suppressor bill that we passed, I think 1 or 2 sessions ago. The bill that we passed 1 or 2 sessions ago actually allows you to possess a suppressor without a tax stamp. As long as it's made in Texas, it stays in Texas, it doesn't leave Texas. This bill doesn't do that. That's why I think this one's a lot easier to swallow for most people and a lot harder to argue against, because literally all it does is it lines out the word short-barreled rifle from 4602 of the Penal Code that says it's not a state crime. It's still technically a crime, although I would say it's not because it violates the Constitution, but it's still a federal crime to have a short-barreled rifle, whether it's made in Texas or it's made in Maine under federal law. The only difference is that now it's not a state felony. And why is this important? This is actually quite fortunate that this happened today, that we're having this hearing, because on Monday, I just secured a dismissal for a client. I had a client who was doing a photo shoot out in public, and it was at the zoo in San Antonio. He was doing it in the parking area, the parking garage there, just doing a formal photo shoot. Had lights, a professional photographer, and one of the pictures he was taking was just him with his handgun kind of sitting and looking down, and like an Old West type photo. The guards called the police and said, hey, these guys aren't doing anything wrong, but we're trying to close the garage. And can you he's got a gun, he's not doing anything with it, he's not breaking any laws, he's just taking photos. But since there is a gun present, can you just come and ask him to move along so we can close the parking garage? Well, the police showed up, they arrested him when they searched his vehicle because he didn't have his handgun in a holster. Wouldn't hurt anybody, but it was openly carried without a holster, so we need to get rid of that holster requirement too. And when they searched through his vehicle, they found his AR pistol. Well, what they did was they charged him with felony short-barreled rifle under state law, 4602, because they didn't know the difference between an AR pistol and a short-barreled rifle. If you look at this picture, and again, I do have some examples here of just these two parts here, actually without even the top. It's just the pistol grip and the stock. If you want to see some actual examples, I can show you the difference between a rifle, a pistol, and another type of pistol. And kind of how crazy it is that these use the same ammo, the same mechanisms, but it really just matters what you put over here as far as the barrel length goes, and what you put on the back as far as a stock. And it's not just pistol braces, there's also something called a stabilizer brace, or a stabilizer blade, which also is fine with a pistol. Finally, this is how arbitrary the SBR law is. When the NFA was first passed, the barrel length was actually 18 inches. It had to get changed later because after the Vietnam War, the military, or even during the Vietnam War, the military was transitioning from the M1 Garand and the M1 carbines to the M16A1s. Well, so they started selling all these M1 Garands and M1 carbines to the general public. Well, they just created a whole bunch of felons because the law said 18 inches and the M1 carbines had a barrel length of 17.75. So what did they do? They just said, oh, well, let's just make it 16 instead. Did it make anybody safer? No. Did it make the gun more lethal? No. All they did was change the barrel length. So this is a very arbitrary law to begin with. Texas shouldn't be really engaged in that. I really loved what Kyle said about, I never even thought about that, about getting a shorter barreled rifle for my kids to be able to shoot. I just told them to suck it up and here's your big giant 26-inch barrel, learn how to carry it. So with that, if you have any questions about the bill, I do urge passage. I do thank the senator for offering this, and I hope to see it passed in Texas.
Well, thank you both for your testimony. Recognize the Dean of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is a question for either of you. Do you know how many states and which either heavily regulate or prohibit these weapons?
So I can get back to you on that to give you a specific number. Of course, again, this is a federal issue that is still in effect.
Right.
I can get back to you with a specific number and name of states that have adopted something exactly like this.
I can tell you, I think there's 9 that specifically ban under state law SBRs, but all 50 states and territories ban SBRs unless you have a tax stamp. But there are only, even with a tax stamp, there are only 9 states that ban SBRs, but those are also the same states that just ban any semi-automatic AR-15 type rifle, generally. So,
CJ.
yeah, and I can get you, Senator, I can get you the specific list, because I might be 1 or 2 off one way or the other, but I believe it's 9 at my last check.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dean. Senator Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The most important question you'll answer today, Kyle, is are you going to make Bible study in Lubbock tomorrow at 6:30?
I wish I was going to be there, Senator.
He is in a Bible study. We meet on Fridays with a group of guys, so I just didn't know if you get home or not. I'll be there, hopefully, if I get up. So it's good to see you.
I wish I was, Senator. Thank you. And again, I'd be glad to give you some historical context of how this came about with the NFA, if y'all are interested as well.
Well, thank you both for explaining this to us. This is very helpful. Any other questions from members of the committee? Senator Hagenwood, do you have any questions for the witnesses?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Senator, can I make one clarification?
Please.
I don't have full rifles with me. I just want y'all to know that. I just have, it's an inoperable piece of equipment that will explain this if you'd like to put your hands and see for yourself what we're talking about.
Well, thank you. And he's got those for anybody who wants to see him, during the session or after the hearing. No, thank you for walking through that with us. Thank you both for your testimony.
Yes, sir.
For being here.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
And we'll open public testimony on Senate Bill 1596. And the chair calls Flo Rice, Ken Moore, Lauren Pena, and Nicole Golden. Again, call Flo Rice, Ken Moore, Lauren Pena, Nicole Golden. Those are the only 4 witnesses who have registered to testify, the only 4 remaining witnesses registered to testify on for or against Senate Bill 1596. We'll look forward to hearing from them. If anyone else wishes to testify, please make your way to the table so that we can make sure we have you set up. And we'll begin on my left, your right. Mr. Moore, there you are. Remember, especially if you're on the end of the table, make sure you get close to the microphone and introduce yourself and go ahead. Mr. Moore, you're up. Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Ken Moore, and I am for this bill, and I'm representing myself. This is a bit out of my lane. Many of you have seen me here before testifying on election integrity bills, and I'll be here for the rest of the day doing just that. Gun laws, though, I have an interest in them. For one thing, they tend to be the canary in the cave when it comes to election integrity bills. Somehow, they always seem to go together. When you have people who want to go one way on one, you have people who want to go the same way on the other. But the other thing is that I am a gun owner. I have a license to carry, and have an interest in wanting guns to be safe. Now, you think, well, what does this have to do with gun safety? If in the middle of the night, God forbid, somebody does kick in your door, and you have to use a gun to defend yourself and your family, you want the bullet to hit the target. You want it to hit the bad guy. You do not want it to whiz past the bad guy and go through the bedroom window of your neighbor across the street. The brace helps you do just that. It gives you that control over your gun. And it's been a tight situation when things are very tense. It's a very helpful thing to have. And so I am for this bill. I think it's a very good idea, and I urge you to pass it.
And thank you for your testimony. Welcome. Introduce yourself and go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lauren Pena. I'm here today representing myself and my kids. I am a gun owner. I think that this bill is really important. I'm glad that you guys have brought this up to us. I have an AR-15 and I'm 4'11", so it takes up more than half of my body. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to be accurate, just as he said. And I think this is a wonderful bill. It's good for women. It's good for children. So I really urge you guys to pass it, and I appreciate your time.
And thank you for your testimony. Good morning. Welcome. Introduce yourself and go ahead.
My name is Flo Rice, and I'm opposed to Senate Bill 1596. Thank you for
Ms. Rice, get a little closer to the microphone so we can hear you.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. It's by the grace of God that I am here today. I was shot by a sawed-off shotgun in the Santa Fe High School mass school shooting on May 18th, 2018. A 17-year-old boy walked into the school with a sawed-off shotgun easily concealed under his trench coat. I didn't see him in the hall. The sound of the shotgun blast was so deafening that I thought it was a bomb. When I fell to the ground, I saw my friend Ann laying dead in front of me. And then I looked at my legs and saw bloody bullet holes, and I realized it wasn't a bomb. I had been shot. I had been hit with 6 out of the 8 buckshot. The shooter killed 8 students and 2 teachers and wounded 13 that day. In the classrooms, the kids were trapped. They were easy targets for the wide blast of this sawed-off shotgun. He didn't even have to aim. Some of them hid in closets, and he shot them through the door as they were holding it shut heroically to protect their friends. The current process, as I understand it, for registering a short-barrel firearm requires responsible gun owners' commitment to an extensive background check. I fear without this commitment, sawed-off shotguns would become more readily available to minors. I am a Second Amendment supporter.
You take your time. That's okay. Take your time.
But I believe it should be followed in a responsible way that prioritizes the safety of our children. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony. Thank you for being here. Welcome. Introduce yourself. Get close to the mic and go ahead.
Yes. Good morning, Chairman and committee members. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. I'm Nicole Golden, the Executive Director of Texas Gun Sense, and we do respectfully oppose HB 1596. I'll just go into just a little bit of the reasons why and a little bit of history. I won't be long. Short-barreled firearms are strictly regulated by federal law. Really, essentially, the purpose of a short-barreled rifle is to make the firearm easily concealable and maneuverable, significantly enhancing its lethality. Congress took necessary public safety action to regulate these firearms many years ago during the Prohibition era when they became a weapon of choice, frankly, for mobsters. The 1934 National Firearms Act was the first federal regulation of guns in America. This vital law ensures that the purchasers of particularly lethal firearms and components receive heightened scrutiny, including fingerprinting and photo identification before accessing these weapons. And there was a case that did bring this up, and many years ago, again, 1939, the U.S. Supreme Court heard the case, U.S. versus Miller, ruling that through the National Firearms Act, Congress could regulate the interstate selling of a short-barreled shotgun. The court stated then that there was no evidence that a sawed-off shotgun, and this is in quotes, has some reasonable relationship to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia, and thus we cannot say that the Second Amendment guarantees the right to keep and bear such an instrument. But of course, I don't want you to just take it from me. You just heard incredibly compelling testimony from my friend who experienced the unthinkable in Santa Fe, where students, parents, teachers, and an entire community were tragically and permanently altered by a teenage gunman who used this type of firearm. Our hope is that some of these facts and history we've laid out, but especially combined with testimony like this about personal impact, will guide your decision to protect our communities by voting against this legislation and ensuring that the federal law restricting these weapons can do its intended job. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your testimony. Senators, any questions for any of our witnesses? We thank you each for being here. Thank you. Everybody gets heard, everybody gets listened to. Your voices matter. Thank you for being here.